Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at thestartupfactory.tech.
So, welcome to another episode of From the Factory Floor with your usual team of James and Ian. Hi, Ian.
Hi, James. How you doing?
Yeah, not so bad. It's a very sunny day here, so I can't complain.
That puts you in a good mood. Can't be bad.
Always does. And this week, we're very kindly joined by TSF's newest team member, Nyree. Hi, Nyree.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, not so sunny here, but it has been, so
Good.
That's all good.
So, Nyree's joined TSF as to really help and push on sort of the marketing efforts that we do. So, I think rather than me trying to explain it, I might actually might as well hand over to the expert Nyree and just give a quick introduction to yourself. What did you do?
Okay, thanks, James. So I would have liked to have heard you explain it, I think. I'm Nyree. I've been working with Startup Factory for a couple of weeks now, but been speaking to Ian and some of the team for a bit longer. I've got quite a potted history, I think, in terms of marketing, but I've only ever worked in marketing, so there hasn't been any career diversification for me. I'm a bit boring in that respect. Did it at uni, and that's been it for me. So I've worked in travel, automotive, healthcare, public sector, agencies, and then last year started getting a lot more involved in startups, and I absolutely love it. And I kind of made a decision this year that was where I wanted to focus a lot more on. I had a baby last year as well, so I've had to kind of do a bit of a juggling act and reevaluate a few things. And for various reasons, I absolutely love the startup. It is chaos, but I like that. It really suits me. And getting involved in everything as well. I'm that type of person. So I've been working with Ian and yourself and the rest of the team for a couple of weeks now. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of your startups that you're working with. I've got a couple I'm working with separately as well around healthcare, financial services, that type of thing. It's been great, really interesting. Everyone is very unique. Everything is very unique, but there are a lot of really common principles as well, which I think has been nice.
Well, I think that's the point where we got to, and chaos is a good word, isn't it? Because it's creative and it's experimental and free-flowing, but I think we got to a point with ours where we became a little bit routine and lacked focus and lacked structure, and I think you've brought that kind of discipline aspect of marketing to us, but also kind of lifted our heads up really in terms of content and messaging and just being a bit more open-minded and forward-thinking about marketing, because I think marketing can be seen as a bit of a touchy-feely, softy thing, but I think undoubtedly, from a startup's perspective, it's a key part of their armoury.
No, I think like you say, I think the other thing is the expertise as well, because I think a lot of people think they can do marketing because they think it's, put a couple of posts on social media, couple of blogs, but obviously that's just kind of a drop in the ocean in terms of actually making something really organised and actually having an effort and a purpose, which, like I say, I think is what Nyree's already started to help us with. So, I mean, from your experience now, what's the main difference between, obviously it's always interesting for us anyway here, is in terms of the difference between the startups and sort of the corporate commercial world?
Oh, blimey. There's loads. And listen, one isn't better than the other. I think it depends who you are and what you like. I passionately believe that marketing is not a service. So, and I think in a lot of corporate worlds, they're obviously more established. They know who their audience are or their target market. And the process, no matter what organisation you're working in, the process can become very autonomous. You kind of get into that sales cycle, you're doing the creative, you're doing the messaging, you might refresh the website, etc. But actually in a startup, everything's up for grabs. And I think the thing that's the more I work in it, and I think it surprises a lot of people, is how early you need to have somebody with that marketing hat on, whether it's somebody who's got the expertise, or someone that's got a keen interest, because marketing is about talking to people, and that's not just customers. That can be investors, your stakeholders, B2B, etc., and finding out what they want to hear, and then making sure that we're tailoring the message to them in the right way. So if you're going down the route of creating an app or a website or a product, and you get right to the end point and you go, well, that's great, how do we create the advert? For me, it's too late, because there's a lot of value that marketing has a lot earlier on in the process. So it can be, create a couple of social media ads and do a nice PowerPoint. For me, that's not marketing. That's a bit more of a design or an afterthought, and it shouldn't be an afterthought, particularly not in startups. It needs to be really early on in the process.
No, I think the point you said there about the messaging and who is it you're trying to focus and what do they want to hear, I think is often the part that people miss. It's like saying before about people who do a post on social media or whatever. It's not really got a purpose. It's not targeting. It's not got an action associated with it. So I guess is the real importance of marketing and why it's seen so early is to make sure you're targeting the right people in the right way.
Yeah, and you understand who they are and what they want to hear. That's the difference between marketing and broadcast. So we can schedule 10 social media posts on what we want to tell people, but that's broadcast. Or we can spend a lot of time listening to customers and finding out what's important to them, what motivates them, and what equally demotivates them or detracts them. And we can craft something that meets the needs of the customers, through products or tech, and that's marketing. And for me, that's the key difference.
Yeah, we talked on a previous podcast around the importance of, concept of product market fit and early customers getting traction. And for me, what marketing helps there, as James alluded to, is the kind of targeting the right buyers, creating a compelling message around our capability. The problem we're solving, the testing work we've done, the case studies, the purpose of the business. I also think as well, one thing that you've brought home to us, Nyree, is kind of getting the profile of the team out there in a startup as well, the capability, the skills, the experience, because that obviously gives those early adopter customers confidence that there's a capability there behind their product that they may be kind of the guinea pigs for.
Yeah, and I think people buy from people, don't they? It's such a sort of cliche thing to say, but particularly in this day and era and age, we're not just buying the product. We want to know what the ethos of the company is. We want to know who runs that company. We want to know the backstories. And particularly through social media, that's all available to everybody. So historically, you would be talking about the product and here's the features and the benefits, but now we have to talk about, and here's the people that made it, and this is the story where it came from, and this is the team involved, and this is how we work. And even down to things like HR policies, and working environments and work-life balance. That's equally important when we're making a decision about which brands to engage with and build relationships with.
And it very much mimics what investors look for, especially like we do in these early stages, where it is really about the people and their story and their message as much as, because a lot of the time the product won't actually exist yet. Whether it's an idea. I mean, obviously we've done sessions recently where the founders have got fantastic backstories that lead into what the product is and why it exists, but the product doesn't exist yet. So it really is about the team and their message, and then eventually how that message translates into the product and how that's going to then go to the right individuals who actually it needs to be in front of.
Yeah, I mean the product, I wouldn't say this to your to your team in the office, but the product you can change, can't you? That's the easy thing to change, she says, having no product design experience. Yeah, no, yeah. Don't let them listen to this. But you can change the product. We can't change the people, and we can't change their story and their motivation, and that is as important as the product.
I guess, once you've got the team and then you start to develop that product and how you then almost showing the journey. I mean, you look at some of our startups like Social Plug, I think some of the work that Reese does in terms of showing his journey and the product development, I guess gives anyone who's then looking and wants to be involved with it such a good story. I guess that's what part of marketing is, telling the story, isn't it, of the person through to here we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And the channels that we all kind of live and breathe on now, whether we like it or not, are all about stories, aren't they? And telling stories and creating content. And again, it goes back to that principle of what do people want to hear? What are they interested in? Not necessarily what do we want to tell them.
That's a good point, because I think, again, I think we're as guilty of this as anyone. You get very passionate about your thing and energized by what you're doing, and you really need to kind of step the other side of the table and live in your customer's world and communicate in a style and tone and content that kind of resonates and connect them. And that's the content strategy piece, which I think you're helping us with. And it's just been really insightful, I think, in terms of how easy it is to miss some key messaging just by not thinking about it and by being overly energized about what you're doing rather than thinking what does the customer want, why would they buy from you, why are you different, and getting those messages across.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose especially when you've got a mixed message as well, like TSF's a good example where, obviously we're here for founders to help them, realise their vision and create the MVC, to steal Eric's terminology from yesterday, the minimum viable company. But also, there's opportunities for investors, and how you then mix your messaging or have very different channels. Like that's why, I know some bits go through Instagram, some bits go through LinkedIn because it's slightly more professional message potentially.
I just don't get Instagram.
You will.
But you're right. I think one of the complicated things for us is, our target audience is investors, founder entrepreneurs, and tech folk. And it's very, three very diverse, different audiences that are looking for different things. So, yeah, I think 3 weeks in, I think we've learned a lot from you, Nyree. It's been really helpful to articulate what our proposition is, the channels, the language, and equally up the effort and the ante, and kind of make marketing an integral part of your everyday activity. It's not a one-off thing, do it on a Monday and take care of it. It's kind of live and breathe it as part of the energy in the business, really.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's always helpful to have somebody in some capacity just with that head on, because I haven't really had to create anything for you. All of those assets have been there, those conversations have been there. It's just my focus is thinking, okay, how can we use that externally, or how can we turn that into a post? But you're already doing all of the stuff, and that's where, if you haven't got somebody with that, just with that kind of remit or that mindset, it does kind of end up sort of slipping away, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's really something that, I think we said all the way through when I think we did an earlier podcast about marketing with Georgia, and it was about how so many people forget about marketing to some extent. Like you say, it's, I'll organise a few posts and buffer, and I know I've been guilty of doing that at times. Of it's we've done something, that's it, never not thinking too deeply about it. When, like you say, a lot of companies, not just ourselves, create this great content, but a lot of the times it just doesn't translate into actually something being pushed out or a post being created. It's just a lot of times it just happens because there's no one with that mindset, and it's something that founders should probably make sure they try and add to their mindset every time they're doing something. Is, like I said with Reese, the amount of times I've turned around and he's got his camera out taking a picture of a meeting to put a post out, and I think it's a really good example. I know Rich at Spokes did something similar as well, always taking pictures and putting posts, and he managed to generate a really close-knit community of people who were following his story, but also interested in the product, and then became interested in the product, and they became his core users, which I think is kind of testament to what can happen if you do it right.
They can, and he'll have built a very loyal customer base that way, that traditionally he probably, or anyone would have probably had to spend a real lot of money and a long time to kind of nurture those people, but they've bought into him. They feel like they're part of his journey because they've consumed his content, and therefore feel very loyal. And I think even if, people do make mistakes, startups make mistakes. I'm not sure I really believe in mistakes. I think they're just opportunities to learn what works and what doesn't. But if there are those things, people are very forgiving of that because they've already built that relationship and that brand, and they've bought into you. So I think, again, that's really important.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the founder journey, and I think that's you can message that out quite nicely. We're currently doing a fundraising for Free Up with Tom, and in the deck there's a timeline of Tom's journey from academia to getting his first device with us, and what the last 18 months have been around testing, piloting, and pivoting. And I think that tells you a lot about the personality of the individual, and the warmth and the character, and how the founder creates personal engagement, as you say, around the brand of the company is synonymous, really, with the brand of the founder, and that's what people buy into. Giving it a go, doing something innovative, doing something new, and I'd like to think generally the people we work with are decent, nice people as well. You can have a beer with.
Yeah.
And I think that's always helpful.
No, I mean, I guess the question then really is, once you've, and again, it's almost at what point almost marketing must pivot from you've got your early adopters, the people who are willing to take a bit more of a punt, have really bought into the story, of how does it then translate to taking that potentially quite close-knit community you've developed and making that slightly more mass market is a very different challenge.
Yeah, it is a different challenge. Sorry, Ian, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to answer the question as a marketing expert.
Go on.
Sorry to interrupt. No, I mean, my simple take on that is then basically about lead generation and building your funnel. I think once you've found your messaging that works, it's creating that traction. It is actually going through that sales funnel and the various stages of that. I think that's personally quite simple, but I know it's complicated to enact.
Yeah, I think the other thing I was going to say is that close-knit community, how do we then turn them into ambassadors so that you can scale it on that platform as well? It works perfectly with the concept of funnel management, but you then have these brand advocates that are out there championing and recommending your brand, generating those leads almost for you through word of mouth, educating people on what you're doing. So that's the first step, and then obviously we want to evolve it so they almost become, to use a phrase that Reese would talk about a lot, micro influencers or nano influencers, as we talked about yesterday.
Just to scale, because and I guess the interesting thing, or the way I was thinking about it, is your initial early adopters are very much based on your story and your messaging. And then once you go to sort of the mass market, you almost want to make it about your customers' stories. And like say, the ambassador, that almost ambassadorial role. And so you can see it doesn't just work for me. It's worked for all these other people. And that's when you get the people who are slightly more potentially risk averse, don't want to buy into something too early. The people who aren't looking on Kickstarter every day to try and find something new and exciting and take a bit of a punt. You can see actually it is successful. There's testimonials. I know something that we're very keen on in terms of TSF, and we've had some fantastic feedback from our founders in the past. And I guess it's widening that message to try and reach as many people as possible, but still maintain that integrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess when it comes to that, it's also, we've spoken a lot around the theory of it. And I'm trying to think of some really good examples sort of in a wider context of startups that have done something really groundbreaking or different in terms of their marketing. I don't know if you guys have got any examples of that.
You had one, Ian, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're obviously, Brewdog currently courting a little bit of adverse publicity and controversy around some workforce morale issues. But I think when Brewdog were kind of founded back in 2007, they had a purpose. They were just fed up of mass-produced industrial quality beer and lager, and James Watt and Martin Dickey and Bracken, the chocolate Labrador from where Brewdog's name kind of launched. And I think there's so much within that around the personality, the imagery of the dog traipsing around the brewery. And their whole branding and marketing and messaging has just been consistent about being disruptive, maybe a touch arrogant at times, but certainly memorable. I mean, Hardcore was that Hardcore IPA. I'm a bit of a fanboy of Brewdog, so Hardcore IPA was their first beer, and they kind of attached the product names to the brand values, to the purpose. They obviously launched Equity for Punks, and was one of the early adopters of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding as a vehicle for kind of aligning investment with customers, which is a really clever marketing play, because you generate lifetime value and alignment between two key stakeholders. And then they've just consistently done things that have been controversial but consistent, I'd say, with branding. So from the startup, the product name has been great, but back in, I think it was 2016, they open sourced all their beer recipes. So they kind of gave away their secret sauce, but that's consistent with being maverick and disruptive. So I think for me, that it's a great story, notwithstanding the current turbulence, of having a consistent brand message, content, clarity. And, I think everyone knows some of the product names have just been quite remarkable, and creativity has been great. So, yeah, Brewdog's a standout startup marketing story for me.
I mean, you managed to do all of that without mentioning the tank as well, which I think is actually quite impressive.
Yeah,
which I think is one of those stunts.
I don't know, when they did their first fundraising, they drove a tank and happened to stall it outside the Bank of England. So some absolutely epic guerrilla marketing tactics.
I still think Tactical Nuclear Penguin was the best name that they did for a beer.
Well, I think they obviously, when Dominic Cummings went on his venture to go and get his eyes tested, and they produced Barnard Castle Ale, which again says a lot about the startup mentality, because within 2 weeks of Cummings going to Barnard Castle, they'd got a new product out there branded. And if you ever go back and look at the tin, it's like you go into the opticians. It starts off clear and then goes hazy. The labelling on the tin, obviously mimicking the fact that you went for an eye test. So, I think being current and being creative has been one of their fortes.
I think that's a big thing about the difference between that startup mentality and the big corporate organisations, isn't it? That they somehow have created and maintained that culture of having an idea and almost executing it at the same time. Whereas I think a lot of corporates probably would have had a 6-month timeline to maybe even agree whether or not to do that type of project. And I think the big thing is, if it didn't work, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. It hasn't ruined their reputation or anything like that, particularly in the world of sort of Instagram stories and social media. 24 hours later, it's all gone. As long as you've not kind of caused harm to anybody, it's much better to try and do some of these things like the guerrilla tactics. And yes, we'll remember lots of them, but there's lots that have probably happened that didn't have that impact, haven't necessarily damaged a brand. I mean, the couple that I suppose they're not really startups anymore, but I always used to talk quite a lot about Innocent Drinks, because I think they were very disruptive and had a very different approach when they launched and came to market originally. So they had a really kind of quite a quirky tone of voice on social media, and they really built that community well. They did a lot of things that were fun, but they really, and they have, like, I think in their Twitter bio it was like, buy our drinks so we don't get fired. Like, no one would ever really say anything like that, would they? Again, you'd never get that type of thing signed off in a corporate organization, but they just really brought that personality out. They built followers, they built a community, they did a lot of fun and games. They kept their product really simple, so they didn't try and overcomplicate it. They just talked about the 3 or 4 ingredients that went into that bottle, and then they let their personality do the rest through all of their channels. So I always used to talk about that and then stopped talking about it when they got bought out by Coca-Cola because they're not a startup anymore. And then the other one I always I talk about a lot because I think it's really important and it shows how they've managed to grow is Amazon. So Amazon, I believe, still don't hold a meeting internally unless there's a memo created that talks about how that meeting is going to benefit the customer. And that is, you can't get any more kind of marketing advocacy than that, can you? You know, they're so customer centric that, you know, conversations, meetings and time is not wasted unless it absolutely benefits that customer, and it keeps everyone in that organization really, really close to the customer and having that customer first mindset. So I always think there's a lot that can be learned from that type of principle.
So, I mean, going back to the innocent example, I remember going to a talk that the founders did with Yui at an Innovate UK conference. I remember them saying when they first came up with the idea and going back to the story and really follow how they've injected their personality, was they went to it's like Camden Fair or something like that with a load of these bottles of this fruit juice smoothie they'd made, and there was 2 bins. One said, should we give up our day jobs and make this, and or should we go back to our day jobs? And by the end of the day there was only 4 bottles in the should we go back to your day jobs, and it turned out it was their parents. And kind of how that story and that sort of very simple but very effective messaging is kind of carried through. And then I suppose going on to Amazon is a nice way to link through to the final part of what we wanted to discuss today, which is the book.
I didn't even realise I did that. I queued it up perfectly, didn't I?
I was going to say it's very nicely done. We've written a book, so obviously it's got the same name as the podcast From the Factory Floor. It's on Amazon, so thanks for queuing that one in very nicely, Nyree. So I mean, I suppose Ian, I know it was yours and Guy's brainchild, really. Do you want to sort of just say a little bit about the book, what it is, who's it for?
I think it's about our passion for startups, really.
But,
and that
I might as well fill in while he's struggling. So
I can still hear him.
He's back.
Yeah, for some reason you froze and I dropped out. Can you hear me now?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, the book. Well, I think there's a number of things that capture why we wanted to do a book, which kind of reflect the ethos of a startup. And, as Nyree's indicated, try and keep that spark of being a startup, although we're 3 years into our journey. I think that our purpose was to help people realise their dreams and ambitions. And the book is a manifestation of that, because we put our blood, sweat, tears, experience and know-how into the book as a DIY guide for people to get some insight and share it. It's got our passion in and our passion for startups and everything around what that venture looks like. But it's also got no hype and it's grounded. And that's what, we're made in Manchester, and we've got that ethos. We are substance over style, and I think that's, again, a virtue that's important for startups in how they are and also their marketing, in terms of, you've got to work hard at something. But the book, I'm really proud of the book. But for me, it's about the spirit of what we're about. It's got the passion, why we do it, who we do it for, and then the content of it. I think it just captures, hopefully, some really useful messages of experience and takeaways for people that are thinking of doing their own thing.
No, I think when we started when we came up with the idea of writing the book, and it's not just Ian, it's not just Guy, it's not just myself. I think every single member of the TSF team at the time contributed to the book. So whether you're a techie, there's bits around architecture, choosing a tech stack, whether it's more the process in terms of project management, whether it's the financial, the legal. I think the way that we approached the book was there's something in it for everyone in terms of advice or our story or what we've experienced as TSF and the TSF network. That means it should be a valuable resource for anyone just to have, almost get that first step on the ladder if they were thinking of doing it and becoming a founder. But that's now and it is now available on Amazon, as we mentioned, on in physical and Kindle edition.
Yeah, and I think the way we intend to use it is as a piece of tangible collateral, because everything is on digital these days. But post COVID, I'm a great advocate of face-to-face, meeting people, meeting groups of people, doing meetups, and I think the book is a tangible artifact of what we're about, and it's quite different in this day and age. And from a recruitment and a hiring point of view, it hopefully kind of shows you that we're passionate about what we're about, and why we want to do it.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to check out the book, it is available on Amazon, and I'm sure there'll be future editions where we can, Nyree, you might be able to chip in with a chapter or some advice from marketing. A whole page. Is that with pictures or without?
Yeah, I'll make them look nice.
So I think that's kind of it for today. I mean, usually we do sort of a key takeaway from the podcast. So Nyree, I think, is there any one piece of advice if there's a founder listening who's kind of thinking about the marketing efforts and what they're doing? Is there one key thing you'd want them to take away from what we've said today?
Just the earlier the better. The earlier the better.
Ian, how about yourself?
For me, I'd say, and this is a bit after the event for me, but with hindsight, I would get a marketing professional into your team. So to support Nyree's point, the earlier the better. Don't think you can do the marketing yourself. You can get some good content, but it's about distribution and connecting. So get a marketing person into your team who will really leverage and help you do that.
I think for me, it'd be, you have to get someone with expertise, in like we did with Nyree, because it isn't something that is in the forefront of your mind when you're doing things, and there's a lot of content you create, and just think about who you're trying to target in the message. That, and obviously buy the book. Link, I'm sure we can get the links in below. But no, thank you very much, Nyree, for your first appearance on From the Factory Floor.
Thanks very much.
And I don't know how many you've appeared on now, Ian, but you're probably due a break at some point.
I'm probably a veteran actually now, but I'm due a break. My voice is going, so I'll take next week off.
I think you're second only to me on podcast now. So, but no, thank you very much, you guys, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll hopefully catch you on the next one.
Cheers. Thanks, Nyree. Thanks, James.
Bye.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@thestartupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.